welcome to Ogma's Oratory for April of 2017. I think that's where we are. Now, you may notice this weird square above my head. That's the sunlight shining on my chroma screen. Nothing I can do about that. And I think you'll also notice some of the weirdness going on over Rebecca's head. That's also due to light. So we're going to get through this as best we can. You said
I think it has to do with the retrograde.
I was going to say we were talking about before the show, before we went on air. We were talking about the fact that Mercury is retrograde. Oh, Joe, you want to talk about that a little bit so that explain what Mercury retrograde is?
We're in Mercury's retrograde, and it's going to be lasting through, I believe, May 3rd. This is going to be a career and finance retrograde, but Venus is still involved in there, so be careful of communications between you and whoever else is around you because they can get pretty scaly pretty quickly. But mainly the focus is on career and finance. So if you've got some big thing at work, like a huge project or a traveling thing, definitely jump on it. But other than that, keep your nose clean and your head down. Don't tick off your bosses, and you'll probably be in good shape for this particular retrograde.
Well, and you mentioned that Venus was in there, and be careful about talking to your partner and small disagreements becoming much larger.
Yes,
and, yeah,
that can get out of hand very easily.
And considering we're talking about Beltane, that's probably an important discussion to have.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When it comes to communication, I'm huge on communication. I find that clarifying questions are the best way to diffuse a situation. So if somebody tells you something that you think is hurtful or harmful, then you can say something like, I don't quite understand what you meant by that. Can you please clarify for me? And that way you can clear up most arguments before they ever happen.
Assuming that you don't get your emotions involved and just that all goes out the window.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, so tonight's show is about Beltane, and if you're on the email list, you've been getting all sorts of emails from me about sex and Beltane, and that's actually what I had up on the intro screen, sex and Beltane, because most people, when they think about Beltane, that's exactly what they think about. They think about sex, and this is one of the two Sabbats that the Christian Church absolutely demonized. They demonized Samhain because, we're worshiping the dead. They demonized Beltane because we're all out having orgies, right?
According to the Christian Church, yes.
I've been to several orgies. They're okay. They're not anything like what people expect. But there are tales of, back in the day. I know. Well, there was a book published. I don't remember when it was published. Back in the 90s, I think, called West Country Wicca, where the author was from the West Country of England, talking about when she was young, that she actually witnessed and participated in old style Beltane rituals, where the day of, during the day of April 30th, and the other thing is, real quickly, just slightly to the side, Beltane is one of the 4 Celtic holidays. The Celts started
one of the 4 major holidays.
Well, but but the Celts started their day at sunset, and so Beltane goes from sunset of April 30th to sunset of May 1st. Which is one of the reasons why so many people have a hard time with what day it actually falls on. But so she was talking about during the day of the 30th, young men, teenagers, would go out into the forest and they would create what amounts to as a nest, a soft place, blankets, pillows. They would get boughs from the trees, make a soft place for that could be comfortably laid down in, and then that evening they would have the maypole dance, which was basically a way for boys and girls to meet each other if they didn't already know each other. And after the maypole dance, typically they would pair off. Then the young man would take his girl to the space that he had created, and they'd spend the night there.
I've heard
And
something similar, but a little bit different.
okay,
Um, Back in ancient times, I was told by my teacher that what they would do is they would go on a maypole hunt, where they would go off into the forest, boys and girls. And while they were on this maypole hunt, there was a tremendous amount of getting it on going on.
all right, wait, wait,
Go
wait.
back to the maypole and then do the maypole dance.
So immediately my mind goes to shh, be very, very quiet. We're hunting maypoles. I'm guessing that's not what it is. No. Okay, so you're saying they would go looking for the maypole, a suitable tree to cut down and make into a maypole, and
Yes.
there was lots of play going
Fun.
on.
Yes.
Okay. In either case, Beltane is known for sex, and that's kind of a misnomer because it's not about the sex. It's about the conception. My birthday is April 30th. Yet I'm not actually a Beltane baby because I was conceived the July before. And I was always taught that children who were conceived on Beltane were considered children of the gods. Because, it's easy enough to tell, a young girl who's not married, gets pregnant, and, she's only been with this one guy one time because it would happen at Beltane. That's a pretty good chance that this is a Beltane baby.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, that I don't think is talked about nearly often enough is the fact that, and I'm going to pull up here. Let me see if I can pull up. Let me see if I can get this up here. So I've got a wheel of the year up on the screen now, and one of the things you'll notice is that exactly opposite Beltane is Samhain.
Yay!
You want to tell them why you went yay for Bella for Samhain?
The reason why is because your birthday is Beltane and mine is Samhain.
Yeah. So anyway, so one of the things that if you look at it, Samhain and Beltane are exactly opposite each other. And one of the things I was taught very early on was that a major aspect to witchcraft is polarity and balance. And if you look at what Samhain and Beltane celebrate, Samhain celebrates the point of death, Beltane celebrates the point of beginning of life, the end of life and the beginning of life.
Mm-hmm.
They are exact opposites from each other, and they balance. Each balances the other. So you've got this point of this play between the polarity of life and death and the balance between, and that's something that doesn't seem to be talked about a whole lot. Is this the way that the different Sabbats interact with each other? It's not just Beltane and Samhain. It's Yule and Litha, the winter solstice and the summer solstice, the point when the sun is at its strongest and at its weakest. They are opposite polarities, and they balance each other out. Ostara and let me find it here. Ostara and Mabon, the equinoxes, the spring and fall equinoxes. The days are equal in length, but one is for spring and one is for fall. They're opposite polarities. And so you get a lot of this opposition, opposing forces, when you look at the whole way that this works. You've got the opposing forces up opposite sides of the wheel, but you've also got the way that each Sabbat leads from the last and into the next. So there's a lot of interconnectedness in how these celebrations work that I don't
like. There's a lot of interconnectedness in the reasons why we celebrate them and how they
Right.
correlate to lives.
Right. And I don't hear this talked about a whole lot. I really don't. I think part of it is because most of us come from a Judeo-Christian background, and so we tend to think of holidays as individual, as separate from each other. I mean, there's a little bit of the interplay between, say, Easter and Christmas. Christmas theoretically being the birth of Christ, and Easter being his death. But really, I don't remember ever being taught the Christian holidays being interrelated with each other the way that I find the pagan Sabbats to be.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, that's because most of the Christian holidays, as I understand them, have been Christianized from some form of pagan holiday.
and Easter certainly. Easter comes up next. Well, Friday is Good Friday, so it's this Sunday, and you know how to tell when Easter's going to be, right?
When the rabbit comes in, okay.
when the rabbit comes out of his hole to see if he can find his shadow. No. Easter is the first Sunday. Make sure I got this right. The first Sunday after the full moon. Okay, first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get much more pagan than that. That is absolutely the most pagan way of figuring out when a holiday is.
Well, if I remember correctly, for Beltane, it is when we are at 15 degrees in Taurus, and Samhain is 15 degrees in Scorpio. I forget if that's latitude or longitude. I think it's latitude.
And that is one of the three signs of when Beltane is specifically, but of when a Sabbat happens. That's the celestial sign. There's also the calendrical sign. When on the calendar does it happen? Well, it happens April 30th, May 1st. And then there are the natural signs. And I get this from Chris and Kelly, who are our local experts on Celtic Reconstructionism. The natural signs are things like I titled this particular episode, "My Lilac Bushes Are in Bloom, It Must Be Beltane." Blooming lilacs are a natural sign, one of several natural signs that it's Beltane. And so, and each of these Sabbats has a natural sign, or several, a calendrical sign, the day it happens, and a celestial sign. And when all three of those intersect, you know when that particular Sabbat is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, absolutely. And those who are watching live, feel free to join us in chat and give us your opinions. We love to see what you think, especially about what we say.
And don't forget to follow the Discord link if you want to join us live for chat.
Absolutely. In fact, let me see here. Let me see if I can get that set up here real quick, because that one off, that one on. There we go. So you can see that Discord link up at the top. It'll scroll slowly by, so you can copy it in and actually join us if you'd like. If you got a microphone on you and on your system, you're more than happy to talk to you. So you were going to talk a little bit about. You said you had a story, a Beltane story.
I do have a Beltane story.
Tell us, Miss Rebecca, about your Beltane story.
Okay, so my very first Beltane ritual that I ever went to that was a public ritual. I was 7.5 months pregnant, and let's see, this was 12 years ago. I had gone with expectations of watching, and I didn't realize that being 7.5 months pregnant, I was the reigning symbol of fertility. And so I got tied to the maypole with 2 other women who were trying to get pregnant and one of their husbands.
Imagine that. Why would they do that?
Well, apparently it was so that I was all tied up and they could tease me with food afterwards. I'm kidding.
No, you're not.
No, the reason why they did it is because the fact that I was so pregnant and these women were trying to get pregnant, they wanted my energy to help those women to get pregnant. Being tied to the maypole is one of the ways that you can try to attract that energy to get pregnant.
Well, yes, especially since the maypole itself is a phallic symbol.
Exactly. But I'll get into that later because there's actually predating Germanic traditions that suggest that it was something else beforehand. But anyway, the end of my
Okay.
story is after I was tied to the maypole, all four of us, had a gentleman come up to us and give us the most beautiful gift I think I've ever received. He had four pine cones in his hand. One of them was completely closed up, and he handed it to the man, and he said, "This is for you. It's because you're, you have the seeds inside of you, and you're ready to give them away." And then there was two of them that were only partially opened, and he handed those to the two other women, and he said, "This is for you. This is because this is the beginning of your journey. You're not fully open and fully ready yet, but these are to help you along." And for me, he gave me a fully opened and blossomed pine cone that had lost all of its seeds. And he said, "And this one's for you because you're nearing the end of your journey, and I hope this brings you blessings and luck and an easy birth."
That's interesting. And the symbolism is spectacular. Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. Yeah. All right. So traditionally, at least as far as I'm aware, the maypole itself is a phallic symbol. It resembles a male phallus, and
Yes, and there's
traditionally,
typically a wreath at the top that comes down
right.
as you wind the ribbons around it.
Yeah, and as I say,
What does
traditionally
that
there's
represent?
there's the wreath at the top that and so it is literally a dance of a dance of conception.
Mm-hmm.
The wreath being the vaginal cavity, the female aspect, and I understand where that disturbed Christians deeply because they think sex is a sin. Being pagans, being witches, we understand that where we run into problems with the public and others is that they all say, this is a celebration of sex. No, it's not. It's a celebration of conception. It's a celebration of creation of life. It just so happens that you can't have that without sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, we're going to have sex. That and the fact that, I don't, and Rebecca, tell me if this is any different for women. I don't know. I'm not a woman. I know that every year around this time, I get really, really horny. I mean, not...
Well, I'm a Scorpio, so I'm perma-horny.
Okay.
So
But
I can't help you there.
One of the things, one of the things I notice is that every spring, my thoughts start turning towards women and sex. Specific women I do know or have known. I start having these interesting dreams about ex-girlfriends. As far as I can tell, the males are wired for this. I assume that the women are as well. May not be quite the same exact issues that happen to them, but I have no doubt that both male and female are hardwired that this time of the year is the time to get together, pair up, and make babies.
Well, you see that everywhere in nature. I mean, there's rabbits, which is a common thing that people will use. They say, "Oh, you guys breed like rabbits," because during this time of year, they're having tons and tons of hutches full of bunnies. And then birds use this time for nesting and laying eggs. And you've got the caribou who are on the move. And the first ones that go are the pregnant females who are going to their birthing grounds. I mean, it is generally the time for sex and giving birth in this time of the year.
And so we see it all around us. It's not just us; it's everywhere. I have for the last month or so, I have noticed all of the songbirds everywhere, and I was thinking about it this last week. It's like, wow, all of these songbirds going on, and then I started to realize, you don't hear that as much after June or July. They don't sing. Well, because they're singing to attract a mate. It's a mating call. And so
Right.
that makes perfect sense. They're out looking for mates. And pretty much the animals that aren't giving birth are all looking for mates. If they are giving birth, they'll soon be looking for mates. And so, yeah, I mean, this is exactly, this is a natural progression through the seasons, where this is the last of the fertility Sabbats. There are three fertility Sabbats. I got to remember where the camera is. And so Imbolc was the first, and it was more about the life returning to the land, being able to see and actually recognize that we were seeing more sunlight at Imbolc than we did at Yule. Ostara, we have all of these Easter eggs, or what we used to call Easter eggs, Ostara eggs, if you will, brightly colored. When I was a kid, I always wondered, what the hell does the Easter bunny and Easter eggs have to do with with the death of Christ? This made no sense at all. When I became a witch, it's like, oh, fertility symbols. Of course, we've got, as you pointed out, breeding like rabbits, and eggs, the potential for life. That what's what I'm looking for? Realized potential for life. And so, coloring them brightly, I can't talk, coloring them brightly to bring out the, to accentuate the fact that it is an egg and this potential life within it absolutely makes sense from a pagan perspective. And all of a sudden it's like, this all makes sense now. I understand. Absolutely makes perfect sense.
Now, you brought up something really interesting. You said that Imbolc was about the fertility of the land and bringing back the green to the land. The reason why I say that's interesting is because here at Beltane, this is more about the livestock, because a lot of the Beltane rituals of old had things like using the ashes around your stables in your home, or lighting 2 bonfires and running your cattle through them to purify them,
the bellfires,
and to purify their milk and things like that,
and keep away disease and everything else. Yeah, it was a way to protect and bless the livestock. Absolutely.
Exactly. So while Imbolc is more about the land and the crops, this is more about the animals and the mammals, which also relates back to fertility.
Right, exactly. And of course, if you wanted to announce a wedding that you were going to marry someone, you would jump the bellfire with that person. And if you were just wanting luck or a good year, you would jump the bellfire alone. But yeah, jumping the bellfire with your betrothed or with your beloved to become betrothed is an old tradition.
And sometimes the children would also jump the bellfire, but not necessarily when it was full on balefire. They would jump like the hot coals. Right.
And so, these are traditions that have gone on for centuries, that there was an awful lot of tradition involved in these. And a lot of times I have spent time, because I tend to be a cerebral type. I tend to spend a lot of time thinking and pondering and wondering. And so I start to ponder and wonder, why is it? Why do we? And because I am a big believer in understanding why. It's not enough for me, this is how you do it. I want to understand why we do it. Because if I understand why, I realize that I can now make decisions and choices that may be beneficial based on why, as opposed to, I can't do it this way because, step A leads into step B, but I can't do step B and I'm stuck. Well, if I understand why, I may be able to skip to step C. And that works in my work life fantastically. And so I tend to think about, why are we doing this? Why is this happening? What's the purpose? Because if I understand the purpose behind it, now for me, it makes my rituals, my acknowledgement of the Sabbat so much more genuine, and it allows me to actually use ritual as a tool to teach and to pass on the knowledge that I've accumulated to others, to the people who may or may not understand that. And so, yeah, absolutely, and so why do we do this? Well, because this is the end of the planting. This is the end. This is when most of the livestock, if they haven't given birth, they're giving birth now. And so this is the last part of the fertility where we see it in nature. And so, of course, we want to make sure that we do similar things, that we also are being fertile. And it not necessarily meaning having kids or getting pregnant. Fertility can be all sorts of things. You can create things with your hands. You can do things to make more money. You can, the fertility doesn't start and stop just with sex and having kids and having offspring. It goes so much deeper.
Well,
And
also another thing that has to do with Beltane is purification. Purification of the home, purification of the body, purification of the livestock,
spring cleaning,
purification
yeah,
of everything
absolutely,
around you.
absolutely.
So if you want to use this time, with less of the whole getting pregnant and having kids thing and more of the time of, hey, let's do some spring cleaning. Let's get this fresh air into the house. Let's open the windows because it's finally warm enough. Let's get some of the stale air out of here. Let's purify the whole house and get ready to start fresh. That would also be a good thing to do now.
Let me get the right thing up here. I was actually looking something up. You and I talked a little bit this weekend preparing for the show, and I was telling you I had been doing some writing. I realized this week that I had only one Sabbat up on my website, and I really needed to get more up. So I wrote a bunch of stuff for the various Sabbats, and I honestly don't know whether it's a function of my age or what, but all of a sudden it was actually Unisah that started me thinking about it. There are traditions where throughout the wheel of the year, the god and goddess go through the stages of life, where at Imbolc, the young goddess is a child and carefree and playful, and then at Ostara she's a little bit older, and she's that teenager wanting to start taking responsibility for her life but not quite yet ready. And so at Beltane, we see this idea of the goddess getting pregnant with the god, getting pregnant by the god to give birth to the god next year, and that all makes sense. But I've always found it less than relatable. I mean, yeah, I understand it. Yeah, okay, sure. But I've always had an issue with okay, but that's the gods, and they go through it every year, and that's not what we do. We don't die and are reborn every year. And so I was thinking about what I wanted to write for these Sabbats, these articles on Sabbats, and one of the things I came up with is how each of these Sabbats relates to a stage in our lives. And so at Beltane, I was talking about how the Sabbats interrelate to each other earlier. And what I find is that, where at Ostara, the goddess, and the god are teenagers. And what I didn't even bring in the gods. What I said was I set it up and wrote it as though each Sabbat is a person. So Ostara is that rebellious teenager. She's starting to realize, her body has changed, and she's starting to realize and actually take part in some of these newer pleasures that she didn't know about before because she wasn't old enough for those sensations to happen. And so she's discovering things like sex and how good it feels. But she's doing so as a young person who doesn't have to worry about the responsibilities of or consequences of. By the time you get to Beltane, it's now about the responsibility. It's she's been loving her lover and enjoying the feeling of that. And now at Beltane, she becomes pregnant. She has to take the responsibility of a new life that she has now created within her, and that she has to nurture and protect just like her mother did. And this is something that I've just started to recognize, and it's also something you don't really hear about ever. The idea that each of these Sabbats can relate to how we are and the stage we're at in our own life.
Mm-hmm.
You're being quiet.
I was listening.
Oh, okay.
The other thing that I personally do during Beltane, since I am past giving birth, is I give thanks for the children that I do have. I make sure that the things around me, the gods, goddesses, fae, the dwarves, all of them, I make them understand how thankful I am for
Mm-hmm.
having 4 beautiful, healthy children, and still having a healthy, strong body myself.
Well, and I think that by recognizing life stages within the Sabbats, because as the year goes on, we'll talk about this again next month and on as we do different Sabbats. By recognizing that life stage, those of us who are beyond it, the Beltane, remember what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not married, never had kids, but I certainly was at that age, and to take the responsibility should that happen. And I remember, being younger and not worrying about that responsibility, and the changes and the differences between how I was at one stage and how I became at another. And I think that by using your stage of life as a acknowledgement of the Sabbat, of the season, allows you to now go into new and wonderful directions for your rituals, for one thing, but also to give thanks and to acknowledge, if you're in that stage, you can acknowledge, this is where I'm at, and I understand, and I am grateful to recognize this. If you're beyond that stage, you can look back and say, this was a good time of life. I enjoyed it. I remember it well. And it taught me a lot of things, a lot of lessons. I learned a lot. There were times when it wasn't so fun, but every time that happened, I learned something. And because I learned not to repeat that.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you've got all of these, again, that rolls back into the fertility. You're learning lessons. You are, the lessons are you're fertile with lessons, whether you want to be or not. AFGE is another fucking growth experience. But, the whole idea that you can relate this Sabbat, this one point in the year to a point in your life, and I understand the younger people watching this probably are not going to relate to this at all. All of the older people like myself are going, oh yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's humbling to realize that our ancestors, these people that most of society considers primitive, put those air quotes in there, weren't at all. They understood so much more than our modern society does.
And they lived in much more harmony with their environment than we
Yes,
do.
absolutely. They had no choice. But the fact that these quote unquote primitives understood not only where they were in the year and how to tell where they were at, but also understood the significance of being at that point and
I
what
would
it
argue
meant.
that they did have a choice, and they chose to stay more in touch with nature. Because if you think about this, a lot of these traditions and holidays and things evolved from typical Gaelic festivities. Okay. And at that point in time, we have accounts of Greeks and Romans writing about some of these festivities. And we know for a fact that the Greeks and the Romans were extremely advanced when it came to indoor plumbing and medicine and architecture. And the Gaelics didn't want that. They chose to stay more in touch with nature. So I would argue that they did have a choice, and they chose to be more in touch with nature.
Okay,
They
yeah.
chose to be more in harmony than to go and live off in some big city with all of the technology.
Yeah, I see your point, and I absolutely give you that point. My thought
Thank
was
you.
more my thought was more along the lines of, that they didn't have big cities, they had towns, they had, at least in Europe, because we're, after Rome fell, all of that indoor plumbing and stuff went away.
Yep.
And I tend to think of ancestors more along in the basis of the Middle Ages. But you're right, you go further back, and yes, they did have a whole lot of conveniences that we also have. Maybe not as streamlined as we have it today, but certainly they had a lot of those same conveniences. So you're right. At some points it was a choice, but they still all went to and this whole modern society thing it's only about 70 years old. It's not that new.
That's correct. It has to do with the industrial age, which happened not too long ago.
Well, and even the Industrial Revolution started in the 19th century, and even then people typically went to a butcher to get meat. They understood where that meat came from. They understood how it was created, where they understood what was going on. And up until the last, 20 or 30 years, that people understood that. Nowadays, literally, there are people out there who think that the meat, the ground beef that they get in the store is somehow manufactured in the back room. They don't connect. And
there was actually a newspaper article that I saw, and it basically was a woman getting on a high horse and stating that she was really pissed off and upset that hunters were going out and killing deer and ducks and cows and things like that. And she said, very specifically, why don't you just go to the supermarket and buy your meat there like everybody else does, instead of hurting those poor little animals?
Exactly. Yeah.
He had
obviously someone who doesn't have a clue, and that is part of, for me, that's part of why I follow this path, is to get back in touch with the ancient roots and the genesis, the conception of what it was like and how our ancestors lived. I'm kind of lucky in that my mother grew up on a farm, and so I grew up having some knowledge of this stuff. Certainly more so than most of my friends, who were all, we were all city kids, but their parents were raised in the city, so they didn't understand either. And so at least I had some education and some knowledge, and as a kid, teenager certainly, going back to the small town in Kansas where my mom grew up, and spending time with my cousins who lived on a farm, and going around and I specifically remember at about 14, we were out there right around Litha, and it was time to harvest the winter wheat. And so we're up on the combine, and my cousin Joe, it's his field. He's letting us drive the combine, and we got this little wheel on the steering wheel, and we're doing this, trying to turn the corner, and then we went to from the combine, we went to the track, because there were 6 of us, so we would half and half, we'd swap halfway through. So I started in the combine and then went to the tractor where they were picking up all of the stuff that the combine, all of the stems and stuff, and putting it in the back where they could haul it off. And of course, the tractor was air conditioned and had a stereo, and all the comforts of home. And when we got done, we all headed out across the field towards the house and passed through a cornfield, and the corn was above my head, and playing around in and around the crops. What country kids have done for centuries. And this was brand new to me. This was absolutely something unusual, and it was fantastic. And so I have those memories, and so a lot of this is trying to get back in contact with the ancestors who lived that way, and who were part of the land and lived by the seasons and understood this is just the way things are, because modern life is gotten so far away from it. I actually heard a story where at one point it was summer, and the heat in California caused power outages, and this happened at night, and all of a sudden 911 started getting hundreds, thousands of calls.
I remember this. What are the lights in the sky?
Yeah,
are aliens attacking
these
us?
These are all these lights in the sky. What are they? They were stars.
Yep. Nobody had any idea what they were.
Apparently, people in LA have never seen the stars before because there's so much light. Well, all right, I kind of makes sense. And apparently,
like a Texas person looking around at the snow and going, "What the hell is this white shit?"
Yeah. Apparently, people in LA never leave the city. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have experience with it, if you don't have anything to compare it to, I can see where it would be frightening. And I remember we were at Dragon Fest one year. One of the guys that I work with, Roy, he is a fantastic cook. One year we actually had a competition between three of the people who love to cook. We called it Iron Chef Dragon Fest. But earlier on, he has this butcher he goes to, and he, when he was going up on a regularly every year, we camped together, and so we would give him money, and he'd buy the food, and he'd cook, and which is fantastic. If you love to cook, great, fantastic. I can cook. I'm a good cook. I'm a damn good cook. I just don't like to. And so one year decided he was going to barbecue a suckling pig, a whole suckling pig. And he did. He spent the entire day at camp, and feeding charcoal into the fire, and making sure everything was. And so this was a 50 pound pig. It was good size. So we invited most of Dragon Fest, and it was so funny because one of the people that we were camping with, again a city girl. We went, we're having, the barbecue is for dinner. We're going to take all day to barbecue this thing. So it was planned for dinner. And so we're all going up there to get pieces of pork off this pig. And she walked up, turned around, and walked right back and asked her husband to go get her food. And when he asked why, she says, I can't get any. It has a face.
Yeah.
Okay.
I grew up on a subsistence farm, so we didn't have the big fancy machinery that you guys had to cut the wheat and everything. We just grew what we needed, and everything was handpicked. But I never had the experience of understanding what butchering an animal was, except for rabbits. We loved rabbits too, so I know how to butcher a rabbit like nobody's business. But as far as things like pigs and cows and things, I had no idea. And so one of the things that I did was I actually went down to one of our local butcher shops. And here in town, I mean, the city was a big culture shock for me to begin with, but to find out that we had an actual butcher shop here was awesome. So I went down to the butcher shop, and I actually asked them. I was like, "Hey, can you tell me what it is you do?" And they were able to give me a pretty decent short education in what it takes to butcher different kinds of animals. And so now any kind of major feast that I have, especially for the holidays, I'll go down to the butcher and I'll get something from them because I know where it comes from. I know where it grew up. I know what it was fed, all kinds of things, because you can ask them these questions and they can give you an answer versus going down to King Supers or Market Basket and saying, hey, where did that pork chop come from? They're going to look at you and say, the freezer?
The back room. Yeah.
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 So definitely go down to your local butcher shop. If you have no idea what it's like to butcher an animal, ask them, how is it
Yeah.
done?
Yeah.
Do you have a different a chart for the different cuts of meat? What kinds of meats do you sell? And things like that. Ask
Right.
them if they can get exotic meats in, and bring those into your holiday feast. Now they are going to be a little bit more expensive, but they are
Sure.
completely worth it.
Well,
They do taste better. Trust me, they taste better.
oh, absolutely.
I went
Now,
down there and I got 3 big lamb shoulders that were just to die for.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Now there is the old adage: never watch the sausage being made, and the truth of that is you probably won't eat sausage for a very long time if you do, because
Yeah.
you don't know what goes into sausage. Basically, sausage is everything that couldn't be used in any other cut, and but if you understanding that
But it's still edible.
oh, absolutely. It's
It's
all
still
meat.
edible.
It's all meat. There's quite a bit of fat in there as well, but I mean, it's all meat. It's just the cuts that were left over after the rest of the animal was butchered, and that's one of the reasons why they add so many spices to it. Is give it some taste and give it some some kick to it. But the thing of it is that with understanding where this stuff comes from and why we should be thankful when we have a meal. I've talked to vegans, and they're like, why, and out of curiosity, why don't you eat meat? And I've had some say, well, because I don't want to kill a defenseless animal. At which point I look at them and say, you realize you're killing a defenseless plant, right? Never occurred to them. Again, these tend to be the younger folks who, as much as I hate to point fingers, the millennials, they this is the way things have always been, and this obviously the way it always has been always will be, and so it never occurs to them, oh, you have to kill something to eat? Yeah, whatever you're eating, you're killing something. And
I forget which show it was, but God, probably maybe 10, 20 years ago, I was watching the show, and there was this one woman who was invited to dinner at this guy's house, and she wasn't eating. And they asked her, why aren't you eating? And she says, oh, I don't believe in killing anything. And they said, well, how do you eat? And she said, well, I only eat apples when they've fallen off of the tree. And we only eat things that have already gone to seed or have fallen off of the bushes. And he says, so those carrots on your plate? She looked at him and says, were murdered.
okay, well, all right.
So yeah, it does go to those extremes.
Yeah. All right. So one of the things I wanted to do tonight, let me see if I can pull it up. I wanted to plug a website. Actually, I wanted to plug a podcast, which is up at the bottom of the screen now. The podcast is called Season of the Witch. It's out of Elgin, Illinois, which appears to be on Google Maps, appears to be a suburb of Chicago. And it's put on by a couple of ladies, Feather and LaFay. Feather, I believe, is the owner of as they say in the podcast, the only magical shop in Elgin. But these two ladies really know their stuff. And what happened was, as I was saying, I spent the weekend writing up a bunch of stuff on Sabbats. And as I was going through, I had found some stuff by Selena Fox earlier on. The Imbolc article had some MP3s from Selena Fox talking about Imbolc. And so I thought, well, that would be cool to have MP3s that people could listen to after reading the article about the specific Sabbats. Great, fantastic. So I started looking around, couldn't find anything. Well, eventually I came across this podcast called Season of the Witch. And they had done specific podcasts for several of the Sabbats, one of which was Beltane. And listening to it. I had gone through, I don't know how many podcasts at this point. There were several out there. The reason I say I couldn't find anything is because usually it was full of music and no real information, which is fine. That's a format you can use. That's a format. We tended to have more information, but that's the similar format to what Hawk and I used when we started up Full Circle 25 years ago. But theirs doesn't have a whole lot of music. It is basically the two ladies talking. Now they do put in a lot of sound effects, which is kind of funny, especially when the timing is perfect. But a lot of really good usable information on the Sabbats. So I started putting those onto at the end of my articles for the Sabbats, because they really going into things like correspondences, stones and plants and other things associated with the particular Sabbat. One of them, I don't remember which one, they were talking, it might have been the Beltane. They were talking about the fact that it was a full moon. No, it had to have been Mabon, because they're talking about September. They were talking about the full moon, and they were talking about also the fact that it was a lunar eclipse, partial lunar eclipse, and also it was Mercury retrograde. Yeah, which was last September.
That is a confusing set of signals.
Right. But that was what was happening, so that's what they talked about. So a whole lot of information there that I found really refreshing, and not a bit of fluff in it. No fluff bunnies. It really a good podcast. So, I highly recommend. Apparently they're on hiatus. They've been on hiatus since November. My understanding is that Feather and her husband are working on rehabilitating a new shop somewhere. I guess one of the problems that based on what I heard from the podcast, Elgin has some really strict zoning laws, and so if you're a retail, you can if you're in a retail spot, you can sell things, but you cannot offer any kind of services. So no card reading, no, nothing like that. So I'm guessing, I don't know, I'm guessing they went looking for a place that was a little bit more pagan friendly as far as allowing some of that stuff. So they haven't done any podcasts since November, but the ones they do have, they went for a year or so. Really good stuff. We're absolutely worth listening to. So if you have time, check out the podcast at the URL down below, because it really is worthwhile.
Now, speaking of time,
yes,
we only have a little bit of time left, and I kind of want to go into a few more things about Beltane, since
absolutely
it's about Beltane.
Absolutely.
Some Beltane things that you can do around your home.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes people would decorate their homes in sprigs from trees that are covered in flowers. They would decorate a May bush, which,
what's a
believe
May
it or
bush?
not, they used to have one particular area where they would steal each other's May bushes.
What's a May bush?
A May bush is a particular bush. Usually it's a thorny bush, because they're considered more sacred. That is decorated with ribbons and flowers and streamers and all kinds of things. And so they would have competitions between neighboring towns who could have the better May bush. And so they'd go sometimes and they'd actually steal each other's May bushes, which is what got that practice outlawed in the Victorian times. But May bushes are a wonderful way to celebrate Beltane.
So they were
red thread. You can take that and tie that on some of the branches, or put them on the sprigs in your home, representing red berries from the rowan tree, which is a sacred tree. And also, according to several websites, attracts fairies, because red is one of their favorite colors.
So you're saying that a May bush is a plant with a lot of little pricks? I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. It's Beltane. I couldn't resist.
Some other things that you can do is the Fae really enjoy it when you leave out gifts for them to kind of keep them at bay, appeased, and away from your livestock, your home, and your crops. So you leave out things like what are those cakes called? It's a special kind of cake. Um,
Fairy cake?
and no, it's made out of oatmeal and milk and honey and all kinds of things. Hang on,
Okay.
let me see if I can find the name of it because it's
Okay, but
I
so
got it here somewhere. Anyway, and then they make like an alcoholic brew alongside it, and you drink that after you eat the cake. And then you can leave little pieces of cake out. You can give some to the eagles. You can give some to the large cats in the area. You can give some to any of the predators that would normally come after your livestock. You can give it to them as kind of like a little sacrifice to keep them away from your livestock and keep your livestock healthy and all of that. Um,
yeah, I can see where if it's got honey and milk in it, I could certainly see where fairies would enjoy it.
Absolutely. Bannock bread.
Bannock bread, okay.
Bannock bread, yes.
And I love my friend
alcoholic
Google.
drink was called caudle, and it was made from eggs and butter and oatmeal and milk, and it was very similar to eggnog, only it was very alcoholic.
Hmm. I wonder, maybe someone should try to make that. So, all right. So, we've gone through a lot of traditions and a lot of thoughts on Beltane. We've gone much deeper than your average book does, or certainly website.
Oh! I almost forgot.
Yes.
I said I was going to tell you the other tradition about the maypole that's not the fertility symbol.
Okay.
The ancient Norse would use a maypole as tree worship during this time because of Yggdrasil, the tree of life.
Yggdrasil.
And it was a representation of that to them, and so they would use it as a form of tree worship instead of a fertility thing.
Well, and something else I wanted to point out. Let me see here. Let me do this. There we go. I had put up earlier a Wheel of the Year. Yeah, that Wheel of the Year. And, it's been interesting. We've had a lot of people watching and absolutely no one in chat. So I guess they're scared to talk about Beltane. I don't know. Worried they'll get pregnant or something. But I was wondering because if anybody would notice that the dates on this are a little off. If you look at the top of it, it says Samhain, May 1st. This is a Wheel of the Year for the Southern Hemisphere. Let me see here. Let me go through here and fix this up real quick and get this to where it is. There we go. So if I change that over, that's what most people are used to seeing. And that is where... okay. So Bill says we are here. Okay, good. I'm glad to know somebody's watching. I can see that you're watching. It's like, this is the first time we haven't had anyone say anything in chat. This is the standard Wheel of the Year, and it usually has Yule at the top, although sometimes you'll see Samhain at the top, because Samhain is the Celtic New Year, but Yule is right around the New Year, so they usually put the beginning of the year at the top. But I was curious to see if anybody would notice and point out that, hey, the dates are a little off because on that last one, because it is in the Southern Hemisphere, in Australia, or for that matter, South America, anywhere below the equator, it's now fall.
They're Samhain right now.
Actually, and that's the other thing I wanted to bring up was the fact that it's no longer spring. Beltane is the beginning of summer. And so it's, it absolutely is a change in seasons. When you look
and
at
in the South, it's the beginning of their winter.
Correct. So welcome to summer. This is, and certainly around here right now, it certainly feels like summer. It was 75 degrees today. I mean, that's kind of cool for summer, but certainly not for the beginning of summer. And so,
like I said, throw open the windows. It's warm enough to let the air in.
Yes. Clean out. Let the spirits of winter be blown out of your house, which is part of that whole spring cleaning tradition. Is your
light a little fire in your backyard or in your
yeah,
hearth, and have your Beltane fire going. Ask for blessings and use the ashes to purify your home.
absolutely. That was one of
Don't jump across your fireplace.
well,
That's
depending
rather
on
difficult.
depending on your fireplace in your house layout, it could be.
Yes.
But
And
but
don't drink too much cottle before you jump a bale fire.
right, yeah. Alcohol and jumping and fire do not mix. I witnessed that firsthand. Well, secondhand. I was there. It didn't happen to me, but I was there when it happened. Alcohol and fire do not mix. And yeah, these are some of the traditions that have gone back centuries, millennia. Spring cleaning, absolutely. Ostara and Beltane are big for, and the whole idea of spring cleaning is getting the stale spirits of winter. Your house has been closed up all winter long. Time to open up the windows and sweep the dirt and the old stale spirits out, and let the new air come in and replace that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
This is a wonderful time to do that.
Absolutely. All right, so we are at that 1 hour mark, a little over actually. So I think this has been a fantastic show. I had a good time, even though nobody wanted to talk to us on chat. I'm kind of disappointed in that, but
Bill said hi.
Yeah, well, Bill said hi. Yes. We had, I guess our regulars aren't on tonight because usually we have quite the chat going on, but this has been a fairly good show. I think I enjoyed it. Hopefully it had a whole lot of information. Hopefully it had stuff you didn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
You being the audience.
And don't forget to be careful of retrograde, which is
yes,
probably why most of our regular viewers weren't on or having communication issues.
All right. So when does Mercury retrograde end?
As far as I know, it's May 3rd.
3rd. Okay. So until May 3rd, we're probably going to have communications issues. Honestly, retrograde, and at some point we're going to probably do a show on Mercury retrograde. But Mercury retrograde does not bother me a whole lot, because one of the things I learned a long time ago is that Mercury retrograde tends to show you the holes in your plans.
Mm-hmm. I personally use it as a stop point. It's okay, let's stop, take a step back, look at the situation again, and then move forward. It's a time for me of being careful rather than plunging forward head first. Right.
Go in with your eyes open. Absolutely. So Beltane with
and then of course I tell everybody, may your Mercury be more fretty than retrograde.
Wow. Okay. There's a reference you have to be a certain age to get.
Wow. I'm not that age, and I get it.
No, you are that age. You're old enough to remember Queen's music. Yeah, absolutely.
Barely.
Remember,
I grew up at a log cabin in the woods.
Well, okay.
I knew what Channel 2 PBS was, and that was it.
All right, so that's your lesson on Beltane and Mercury retrograde. Hopefully you all will have a wonderful, enjoyable, orgasmic Beltane, and we will see you again next month.